I have some cherished items that I keep on a shelf in my office. One of my favorites is this small model church that was gifted to me from my mom during a time of ministry transition. And with it, she had a note attached that says, "God has a church for you." And I always keep it on a shelf in my ministry space because it's always a reminder to me that God has an opportunity for me to be able to minister to people. And throughout my entire adult life, I found what my mom wrote to be so very true, that God has always opened up doors that we didn't expect to be able to minister to other people. I love the church. The church is the hope of the world. The church is both a building and a people. Now, as a building, it's a great resource because we have a place to gather together, to worship, to encourage, to strengthen, to fellowship, to help people. That part is great about the church as a building. But the church is so much more than a building. The church is the people. The way the biblical writers in the New Testament call the church, it's the ecclesia, the called out ones, the people that are assembling, that believe in Jesus and follow Him. That's who we are. We are the called out ones. We are the people that follow and love Jesus. The church is the people. It's more than a place that we attend, but it is all of us being together to know God and to make God known in our world. If we've been reminded of one thing during this COVID-19 crisis, it's that we need each other. Now, this gift from my mom reminds me of two very important things. One, it is so special what happens inside of this building. It's so special for the lives that are changed, for the lives that are helped, for the lives that are transformed by God. The moments that we have in prayer and worship of being close to our God, that part is awesome. There's something special about what happens inside this building. But it's also a reminder that not only is what happens inside the building important, but also what happens outside the building is important as well. Because Jesus didn't just come to save the insiders, Jesus also came to save the outsiders. And church is intended not just to be lived within the four walls of this building, but to be lived outwardly. I purposely sat in the seats today as a reminder that every one of these seats represents both an opportunity and a missed opportunity. It's an opportunity to minister to people, but every empty seat is a missed opportunity of a life that is missing out on knowing and encountering the God of hope, the Jesus that will transform and change their lives. It's a missed opportunity. And so we want to have people experience an opportunity to grow in their relationship with God, and we want to get rid of any missed opportunities so we can fill this place, and better than filling this place, we can fill heaven. I recently heard a politician say, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Paul wrote it better as make the most of every opportunity. He wrote in Colossians 4:5, "Live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive so that you always have the right response for everyone." I mean, it's just this important reminder to make the most of every situation. Make the most of what is going on around us. Yes, it's a very difficult time that we find ourselves in, really in some ways very unprecedented. Because we're not even supposed to meet together with people. It's not even like we could go into hiding and meet together. It's just like stay away from each other. We've experienced now not being able to gather together in this sanctuary to be able to worship together and encourage and fellowship with one another. We're at home watching church on a screen. But yet, Paul's reminder would be the same. Make the most of every opportunity. And even being careful of how we talk, how we speak, how our words might influence and impact somebody that can overhear us, be it a post on Facebook or social media, be it a conversation that we have shouting across the driveway to our neighbor, be it an interaction in a store as we're supposed to be 6 feet apart from any other person, no matter where we are, allowing our words to be so full of life that when people hear us, they're drawn to what we're saying and they're curious, why did you say that? Why did you say it that way? So that we can make the most of those opportunities to minister to people. Now, one of the things that we need to take advantage of in this time is to make the most of every opportunity. And one of the ways that we can make the most of every opportunity is to simply share about what we've seen and heard. One of my favorite stories happened at the beginning of the book of Acts. As Peter and John are walking into the church, the temple, as they're walking through there was a man begging, and as they're walking by him, they didn't have any alms to give him. And it was a man that since birth had been crippled. He hasn't been able to walk, work, do anything for his entire life. Somebody probably carried him there, set him at the temple every morning, came back and picked him up at night and took him home. And so his whole source of income was begging people going to church for help. And so as Peter and John are walking in to the church, they see the man sitting there begging, and they look down at him and like, we don't have money to give you, but what we do have is even better. We have Jesus to give you. And they just reach down, they grab his arm, they pull him up, and God instantly heals the man. Can you imagine what it was like where his twisted up legs finally found strength? And so the man just jumps up, he's leaping, he's walking, he's praising God. It was an awesome moment. And so then Peter and John have the opportunity to preach and to proclaim Jesus to all the people that are there. Now, this gets the Jewish religious leaders upset because weeks earlier they had had Jesus executed, thinking they had ended this whole Jesus movement. And now you have Peter and John there proclaiming the resurrected Jesus, teaching about that. And it gets the Jewish religious leaders upset. And so they go to Peter and John and they're like, you need to quit talking about this resurrected Jesus. And so in Acts 4:18, you read this, so they called them and charged them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. For we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard. I love that part. We cannot but speak. You cannot keep us quiet. We will talk about what we have seen and heard. We will share about what we have experienced. I mean, just a reminder, it's always Jesus that saves souls. We're his witnesses. We just share about what we have seen and heard. The pressure's not on me to change a life. That's God's pressure. That's what God does. God is the one that changes lives. It's my job to just share about what I have seen and heard. So they get to experience something awesome. But right here is this man standing with them as they begin to proclaim Jesus, is this man standing there with them. In chapter 3, verse 8, as Peter and John, as they reach down, as they grab the man, as they pull him up, as he stands on his feet, as instant strength and healing comes to his legs, as he's standing there, his response is to leap up. And 3:8 says, and leaping up, he stood, then he began to walk, and then he entered the temple with them. Can you think about it? It's probably the very first time in his entire life that he was able to go into the actual temple grounds. So he walks in with them into the temple grounds. But watch this. Walking and leaping and praising God. He is celebrating what God has done for him. So it's not just this, yay God. It is a walking and leaping and praising God. And all the people saw him walking and praising God. It wasn't like just another individual walking in. If people saw him, there was a reason that they saw him. It's because he's leaping and praising God. As he walks into the temple area, he's worshiping. It's getting people's attention. He cannot help but to shout out what he has experienced. And then they recognized him as the one who sat at the beautiful gate of the temple asking for alms, and they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. When I share about what I've seen and experienced in God, it gets people's attention. As it gets their attention, it leaves them in a place of awe and amazement. They want to know, why are you that way? Why are you different? Why do you think different? Why do you act different? Why do you talk different? Why do you have a different life philosophy? Why do you process things different? Why, even in the midst of a global pandemic, do you seem so at ease, so at peace? It leaves them at amazement, and then their amazement, it causes their curiosity to come alive, and so they start asking questions. Tell me more. So then Peter and John take the moment to proclaim Christ to that crowd. And even though persecution came, even though the leaders tried to do what they could to shut them down quickly, it did not stop God from doing something awesome. And the church grew from 3,000 to 5,000 people in that one day. What an amazing thing to think about. So here's this man that couldn't contain himself as he goes walking and leaping and praising God. And I would imagine it would go something like this. Jesus healed me. Jesus saved me. Jesus fixed me. Jesus forgave me. Jesus set me free. Jesus made me whole. And isn't that something all of us could say, that if it truly experienced the resurrected Christ, that Jesus saved me, that Jesus accepted me, that Jesus healed me, that Jesus forgave me, that Jesus set me free, that Jesus accepts me, adopted me, Jesus takes me as his very own. Jesus makes me whole. And when we think about that, it just brings about this sense of worship, this sense of awe, this sense of I cannot help to talk about what I have seen and heard. In the front of my Bible, I have two things written down on it. One was from a Bible class I took at Bible college from an instructor that had us write in the front of our Bibles, "This book is my all-sufficient guide for faith and conduct." Now, this is a newer Bible that I bought recently, so I don't have a lot of other things written in it. But the second thing that I wrote down is another quote that I find so life-changing. 10 years ago, I was on the phone with my Grandma Black. Many of you here at the church have met her for the last few months. She's been attending services with us. She usually sits right over there in her wheelchair. And it's been so much fun to have her around. But she called me up on the phone one day, and she was just asking how things were going. And I was kind of complaining a little bit about something that was going on. And so she just cut right to it. And she just goes, "Mark, are you reaching souls?" And that so convicted me at that moment, because here I am griping about some of the stuff that might be going on inside of the church, that I forgot about what should be taking place on the outside of the church. And that is, am I doing what I can to reach souls? So that made my quote list. It's written down in every one of my Bibles that I have. Are you reaching souls? A reminder that what happens is not just about the inside, but it's also about the outside. Our mission remains the same. Global pandemic or normal life, it is to make lifetime followers of Jesus. So I need to make sure I'm making the most of the opportunities that are available to me now. People are anxious, so share God's peace. People are curious, so share God's truth. People are lonely, so share God's love. People are hurting, so share God's hope. Make the most of every opportunity. Take every moment to share what you've seen and heard. I love you all. Have a great week. And remember, you matter to God.